The sun shone brightly over Valencia Prestige Autos, a sprawling dealership renowned for its collection of high-end vehicles. Rows of meticulously polished cars sparkled under the clear sky, their glossy exteriors catching the attention of prospective buyers who leisurely walked through the lot. The lively chatter of sales pitches, the hum of engines, and the occasional laughter of satisfied customers filled the air, painting a picture of success and ambition. Carlos Delgado stood near a sleek, cherry-red convertible, its hood propped open as he carefully inspected the engine. Dressed in oil-streaked overalls, his dark hair tucked under a simple cap, Carlos blended seamlessly into the role of a mechanic. His hands moved deftly, adjusting components with the precision of someone who had spent years mastering his craft. Most passers-by barely noticed him, assuming he was just one of the dealership's many staff members. Carlos preferred it that way. Unknown to most, Carlos wasn't just the head mechanic. He owned the entire dealership. Starting as a humble technician years ago, his tireless work ethic, sharp business acumen, and unyielding determination had propelled him to the top. But Carlos didn't flaunt his success. He was content working alongside his team, fixing engines, and sharing laughs in the garage. As Carlos worked, a police cruiser pulled into the lot. Officer Greg Thornton stepped out, his polished boots crunching on the gravel. Known for his arrogance and quick judgments, Greg carried himself with an air of superiority. His mirrored sunglasses reflected the rows of luxury cars as his gaze landed on Carlos. Seeing the grease-streaked overalls and crouched posture, Greg's lips curled into a smirk. He approached Carlos with a condescending swagger, his attitude radiating the assumptions he had already made. "Hey," Greg barked, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. Carlos looked up, his brow furrowing slightly, but his tone remained calm. "Yes, officer," he replied, standing and wiping his hands on a rag. "What are you doing here?" Greg demanded, his tone accusatory. "You don't look like you're shopping for a car." Carlos raised an eyebrow, taken aback but composed. "I'm working," he said evenly. "Working?" Greg repeated, his disbelief evident. He gestured at Carlos's overalls. "In a place like this? You sure about that?" Carlos's lips pressed into a thin line as he nodded. "Yes, I'm inspecting this vehicle." Greg folded his arms, his smirk widening. "Inspecting? Right. Got ID on you? Let's see it." Carlos sighed, pulling his wallet from his pocket and handing over his driver's license. Greg glanced at it, reading the name slowly. "Carlos Delgado," he said, savoring each syllable. "You got a permit to be here, Carlos. Or are you just hanging around where you don't belong?" The tone of the conversation began attracting attention. A few customers and staff members paused, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. Among them was Laura, the dealership's manager, who frowned as she noticed the brewing tension. Carlos's voice remained steady. "Officer, I don't need a permit. I work here." Greg scoffed. "You work here? What? You clean the cars or something?" A murmur rippled through the gathering crowd. Someone whispered, "Isn't that the owner?" But Greg didn't notice. He leaned closer to Carlos, lowering his voice but maintaining its condescension. "Listen, buddy, I don't know how you got in here, but I suggest you get out before this gets worse. These cars aren't for you." Carlos's jaw tightened, his frustration evident. "Officer, I've told you, I work here. If you have questions, feel free to ask the staff." Greg straightened, glancing around. "Fine, let's ask." At that moment, Laura stepped forward, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Is there a problem here, officer?" she asked, her voice firm yet polite. Greg turned to her, his confidence unshaken. "Yeah, I caught this guy loitering around the lot, pretending to inspect cars. Just making sure everything's legit." Laura's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Loitering? Pretending?" She let out a short laugh, disbelief in her tone. "Officer, do you even know who this is?" Greg's smirk faltered slightly. "What are you talking about?" Laura gestured toward Carlos, a slight smile on her face. "This is Mr. Delgado. He owns the dealership." Greg blinked, his face losing some of its color. Wait, what? Carlos folded his arms, a small smile creeping onto his face. That's right. I'm the owner. I started here as a mechanic years ago, worked my way up, and now I run the place. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, some people chuckling, while others began recording the scene on their phones. Unbelievable, someone muttered. The nerve of that cop. Greg's confidence crumbled. He took a step back, his gaze darting between Carlos and the growing crowd. I didn't realize you're the owner. Carlos nodded. That's what I said. Maybe next time. You'll ask before jumping to conclusions. Greg opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The weight of his humiliation was palpable as he noticed the cameras trained on his face. Clearing his throat awkwardly, he muttered, "Well, I'll just, I'll let you get back to work." As Greg turned to leave, Carlos's voice stopped him. "Officer." Greg froze, his shoulders tensing. Slowly, he turned back to face Carlos, who now stood tall, his confidence undeniable. "I hope you take this as a lesson," Carlos said, his voice calm but firm. "Not everyone who looks like me is up to no good. Some of us work hard, harder than you might imagine, to build something worthwhile. Maybe next time, you'll think twice before judging someone by their appearance." The crowd erupted in applause, their voices filled with support for Carlos. Greg mumbled something unintelligible before retreating to his cruiser, his face as red as a tomato. By the next morning, videos of the encounter had gone viral, spreading rapidly across social media. The footage showcased Greg's arrogance and Carlos's quiet dignity, sparking outrage and admiration in equal measure. Calls flooded the local police department, demanding an apology for Greg's behavior. The department issued a public statement condemning the incident, and Greg was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The ordeal forced Greg to confront his biases, and he was enrolled in mandatory sensitivity training. Meanwhile, Carlos's story resonated with people across the country. News outlets picked up the video, and Carlos found himself at the center of a wave of support. In interviews, he shared his journey from a struggling mechanic to a successful business owner, emphasizing the importance of hard work and humility. "I've faced prejudice before," Carlos said during one interview, "but what matters is how you respond to it. I hope this inspires others to stand tall and never let anyone make them feel small." Carlos also used the platform to advocate for workplace diversity, partnering with local organizations to provide mentorship and training programs for aspiring entrepreneurs. As for Greg, the experience marked the beginning of a long journey towards self-reflection. He attended the required training sessions, listening to stories from people whose lives had been shaped by bias and discrimination. Slowly, he began to understand the harm caused by his actions and the importance of treating everyone with respect. Months later, Greg returned to the dealership, his demeanor entirely different. He approached Carlos, who was inspecting another car, and removed his hat as a gesture of respect. "Mr. Delgado," Greg said, his voice quiet, "I just wanted to apologize for how I treated you that day. I was wrong." Carlos looked up, studying Greg's face. After a moment, he nodded. "Apology accepted. Just make sure it doesn't happen again, to anyone." Greg nodded solemnly, the weight of Carlos's words sinking in. As he left, Carlos returned to his work, the hum of the dealership buzzing around him. The experience had been a painful reminder of the prejudice still lurking in society, but it also reaffirmed his belief in the power of resilience and respect. As the sun set over Valencia Prestige Autos, its gleaming cars stood as a testament to ambition and perseverance. Carlos Delgado remained a quiet symbol of what it meant to rise above. What do you think about this story? Let us know in the comments below. If you love this story, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales. Thank you for watching.